Hi and welcome back to my channel. So today I am finally filming my last labor and delivery story, my third labor and delivery story with baby Kenzo, which was also another successful VBAC. I've been waiting to film this video ever since I had in mind to film my birth story. So I'm finally getting around to doing it, and this is how it went. Okay, so I got pregnant with Kenzo 5 months postpartum. So it was really fast. My periods were not really regular yet after having my second child. So they were short sometimes they were like really long. So I got pregnant pretty quickly postpartum. And in my previous video, I talked about my doctors recommending that I take the baby aspirin, which I did not take, but now I'll explain why I didn't take it. So for my second pregnancy, they recommended it, but they really didn't like push it on me. But I feel like for my third pregnancy, pretty much every prenatal appointment that I went to, they were saying, are you taking the baby aspirin? I would tell them no. At first I was just telling them I would think about it, and then eventually I just had to flat out tell them no. And the reason why is because I did my own research on it. So for those who don't know, the baby aspirin is recommended that women take that who have a history of preeclampsia, and it's supposed to help them from getting preeclampsia again. And since I did have really severe preeclampsia with my first pregnancy, they thought that it would be a good idea to take it for my other 2 pregnancies. Like I said, I didn't take it for my second pregnancy, and I just flat out refused to take it for my third pregnancy because I felt like from my own research that there just wasn't enough justification for taking it. Like there's not really too much long-term effects, like research out there of the long-term effects of taking baby aspirin for the mom and for the baby. And I just felt like it was just too risky for me, and I decided not to take it. I was like, well, I was fine my second pregnancy. I didn't technically have preeclampsia with my second pregnancy. It was more pregnancy-induced hypertension. But I didn't take it for my second pregnancy, and I just flat out refused to take it for my third. And I said, look, I'm just believing God for this one. I'm just trusting him and believing that I won't get preeclampsia. I prayed a whole bunch, and I did not get it for my third pregnancy as well. And so I'm so glad that I stood firm on that, because it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough justification out there for me to take it. And so with the baby aspirin, they would recommend that you take it, I think it's from weeks 12 to weeks 36. So pretty much the majority of your pregnancy, they want you to take baby aspirin. And I think it's 2 times a day, in the morning and at night. And it was just too risky for me. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna take it, but thank you. Okay. So like I said, the pregnancy went well. It was really good. I still had the morning sickness and all that, but that's pretty much standard for me by now. But other than that, the pregnancy went extremely well. I went full term, and I actually went overdue. So it's so funny because being overdue is like, oh my gosh. So because my periods weren't that regular anyway, I'm not so sure if my estimated due date was correct, because I had an early dating ultrasound, and they had changed my due date. Well, first they went by my due date for my last missed period, and that was, I think, November 9th. So that was right on track with everything. But when they did the ultrasound, they were like, okay, well, you're measuring about a week small, so we're gonna change your due date to November 16th. So that's what they did. But when I went to my next prenatal appointment, they changed it back to my original due date. And I think that's due to the fact that, like I said, my periods were not regular yet. So I probably ovulated later that month, and I probably got pregnant probably a week after they said I did, but they stuck with the November 9th due date. So I was overdue. He actually was born November 15th. So I was overdue by 6 days, and I'm telling you, every day overdue is it's really hard to cope, because in your mind, 40 weeks is already a long time, but in your mind you're like, and I know due dates are just an estimation. You could be 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, somewhere in that time. But it was just really hard being overdue. I remember I was going to bed every night pretty much crying. Like, and I know that sounds really dramatic, but I was just going to bed crying because I just wanted the baby to come. I just wanted him out. I was so uncomfortable by this point. The baby was super low. And when I say low, sometimes I just felt like I could reach up in there and grab the baby out myself. That's what I mean. He was so low, so it hurt my pelvic bone. It hurt my vaginal bones. Like I could feel his head like right there, and it was so uncomfortable. Sitting down was uncomfortable. Standing up was uncomfortable. Laying down was uncomfortable. Everything was uncomfortable. And at the end, I'm, still going to the bathroom pretty much like every 2 hours at nighttime. And so every time I went to the bathroom, I'm looking for signs of labor. I'm looking for a bloody show, or I'm looking for my water to be broken. And every time that didn't happen and I had to go back to bed still pregnant, I was just so upset. So yeah, being overdue was an experience, especially from my first pregnancy, where I felt like you know, the pregnancy was over so quickly, you know. And then with my second pregnancy, my baby came right on time. And then with this third pregnancy, I'm like, this boy, he don't want to come out. He just didn't want to come out. So yeah, I was overdue by 6 days. I remember on my actual due date that New Brunswick was having their anniversary service, and I wasn't gonna go just because I was not in the mood to see people. People were asking me, is the baby here yet? Are you having any signs of labor? All this stuff, and I just was like so annoyed. I'm like, no, the baby's not here. The baby's not coming. The baby's never coming out. Like, I was just so over being pregnant. Anyway. So I went to the anniversary service because I told myself it will help me take my mind off things. So I went and I made it through the service, and I'm hoping the whole service that the baby will come. Nothing happened. He came a whole 6 days after that. So yeah, so baby Kenzo was born November 15th at 7:11 p.m., which I'll never forget that time. And he was 6 pounds even. And he was also 18 inches and a quarter. My last prenatal appointment was actually on November 12th. And at that time, I had a membrane sweep because my due date was the 9th. So I was past, and I'm not really one of those people that goes and gets checked internally during my pregnancy because I just feel like there's no reason. You could be 36 weeks and you could be at 2 centimeters and stay that way for a whole month. So I didn't really want to go and get my hopes up, but I did get checked at that appointment, and I think I was 1 centimeter and 70% E-phase. So the lady asked me if I wanted to do a membrane sweep, and I read up about it. I knew what it was, and I was like, at this point, I was overdue. I'm willing to try anything to get this baby out. So they did the membrane sweep, and it was probably the worst pain I've ever experienced. Ever. Like, way more painful than labor and delivery for me. Now, getting checked for dilation never hurts for me. It doesn't hurt at all. It's barely nothing. But the membrane sweep, what they do is they stick your finger into your cervix and they kind of do a little circle to like separate the membranes between the baby and the outside world, because that's what the whole 9 months is, keeping them safe and all of that stuff. But you can't get it done unless you're at least, I think, 1 centimeter dilated. So I agreed to have it done, and it was painful, and I almost jumped off the table. Like, it was extremely painful, and it's so funny, well, not funny, but probably traumatizing to them, because I had my kids in the room, my mom was there too, and they looked at me like, what's going on with mommy? As I freaked out. It was extremely painful, and it's done to kind of encourage labor to start. Afterwards, I had like a little bit of cramps, and I did start to lose my mucus plug that day. I noticed some of it coming out for about 2 to 3 days, but after that, it wasn't anything. So it didn't send me into labor right away, and I don't know if it's something that I would do again if I ever got pregnant again. I'm not sure. It just was really uncomfortable. I felt like for no pay, pretty much. So another thing that I did to try to encourage labor was this activating labor video that's on YouTube. I can link that down below. And it is a really good video. It was really intense. It's like 10 to 12 minutes long. It's a lot of like deep squats and all of that. So I did that. I didn't do it like every day. I probably did like 4 or 5 times, and I just read the comments on the bottom of the video. A lot of women said they did it and it sent them into labor and yada yada yada. It didn't do anything for me. It was just like, ugh. But I did it every so often just because I'm like, okay, this time it's gonna work. This time it's gonna work. This time it's gonna work. And it didn't really cause me to go in labor, but maybe it helped for the labor and delivery process. So if you're overdue or if you're trying to prepare for labor, I can link that video down below. Maybe it will help someone out better than it did help me. So I was scheduled for a C-section on the 15th. They felt comfortable this time. My doctors felt comfortable allowing me to go 1 week overdue. So they scheduled me for a C-section, and I was going to push back against it. I was like, you know, still didn't want a C-section, still wanted to deliver vaginally, especially since I had already done before. But I just went forward with the scheduled C-section. That wasn't a problem. So I went all the way up to the 15th. The night before, I did climbing the stairs. So I walked up the stairs, walked down the stairs, sometimes just forward, the normal way that you walk up the stairs, and sometimes sideways. It's supposed to be one of those things that helps you to go into labor, at least prepare you for labor. I did a lot of walking. My brother went walking with me. The kids went walking with me. I did almost everything you could think of to bring on labor, to induce labor, but this time it didn't work. So the morning of the 15th came, and I started having a little bit of contractions. So probably about like 6 a.m. in the morning on the 15th, but they were super irregular. Like, I would have one, it would last for 30 seconds or a minute, then I wouldn't have another contraction again for about 20 minutes. So I knew that, you know, something was happening, but by no means was it labor or active labor or anything like that. It was just some very, very, very early contractions. So that's the morning of the 15th, starting at like 6, and I had my scheduled C-section was at 1 p.m. So I remember they told me to come to the hospital at 10. So that's what me and my mom did. We went to the hospital. We came in through the emergency room exit. They sent us right upstairs to labor and delivery. So of course, because I was trying to be back, I still had the same requirements as last time. They wanted me to go into labor on my own. They wanted me to, basically they wouldn't induce me and all of that. So I was already having just like contractions, and I went there, and I remember telling my mom on the drive there, I was like, look, well, basically they told me the day of, it would depend on the doctor if they would be willing to induce me like in a light manner, so with the Foley bulbous by starting Pitocin, but they said it would be up to the doctor. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I agreed to that at the time, but I was telling my mom on the ride there, they don't induce me or start Pitocin the way that I want them to, then I'm going right home. We're just going right home. And I know she probably was like, oh my God, this girl is, oh Lord, please help her. But I meant it. If I went there and, you know, I was showing some signs of labor and I was dilated and the doctor just flat out refused to start Pitocin, then I was just gonna go home. I was already showing some signs of labor and just wait for labor to kick in on its own and then head back to the hospital when I felt I was ready to go. I remember I walked in, I told them what my plans were, I told them I wanted to be back. They was like, oh, okay, well, you can go to the observation room and we'll have a doctor come and check you. And I was like, yes, that'd be great. So I went to the observation room, and it's actually the same room that I was in with Matthias. So they're really, really small closet room. But I was fine, I was hanging out. Actually, my sister was another support person of mine. I told her, go to work, don't worry about it, you know, because I don't know what's going on today. So I'm in the room, the doctor comes in, she checks me, and she's like, well, you're at a 3. And I'm like, okay, we're making some progress. And I was 100% effaced. So the doctor asked me if I was comfortable with starting Pitocin, and I was like, yes, let's get this going right now. So I was so happy to hear that news. I was excited and I was ready to go. So after that, then they sent me to an actual birthing suite. So like I was saying before, I had came in for a scheduled C-section, so I would have stayed in the observation room until it was time for my surgery because it was a scheduled C-section. But because I was actually going to, you know, deliver, then they sent me to a birthing suite. So we went over to the birthing suite, and it was like probably 11 o'clock, but they didn't start Pitocin until 1 p.m. I remember that. So we started Pitocin at 1, and I rested for a few hours. I won't say sleep because you're in labor. You can't really sleep unless you have an epidural, I guess. I don't know. So I rested for about 1 to 3. They started the Pitocin. The contractions weren't that bad. Probably, like I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, probably about a 3 or 4 at that point. And I remember we were watching the movie Grown Ups, so that was on. Of course, that kept me laughing, so that was really fun. So during those early contractions, again, I just closed my eyes and breathed deeply and, you know, kind of slowly counted to myself and just stayed focused on, you know, and staying calm and working through the pain that way. So pregnancy and labor and delivery went really well. I was able to eat the whole entire time. My blood pressure didn't go up, so I didn't need the magnesium, and it was just really, really nice. So they broke my water at like 4 p.m. And with my second, I already came into the hospital with my water broken because my water had broken on its own. So I didn't know the difference between contractions, having your water intact versus not having it intact. So when they broke my water, the contractions definitely picked up as far as the amount of pain that I was feeling with them. They were way worse having my water broken. And I was like, oh, okay. But I knew that meant, you know, of course, that I was making progress and I was ready for it. So, like I said, my blood pressure stayed well. I did have a hip lock just for IV fluids and everything like that, but I wasn't connected to pretty much anything else, and I was able to get up and out of the bed, go to the bathroom, which was it's funny, that was a little bit of a nuisance for me because before, the other 2 times I had a catheter, so I didn't have to worry about going to the bathroom. But every time I did have to pee, I had to get up and go to the bathroom, so that was like, ugh. But I still prefer that over anything else so far. Actually being able to move and be out of the bed. So once they broke my water, I got on the exercise ball, and I didn't want to, mind you. It's not like I was like out of energy. It's just I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to get out of the bed. It was comfortable. It's what I knew. But I got out the bed because I knew the exercise ball would really help in progressing my labor. So I got on that, and it was a little bit harder than the one that I had at home. So that was a little bit uncomfortable. They put a pad down over it because I was still leaking fluid from my water being broken. But I stayed on that for an hour, and the contractions on the exercise ball were super intense, but I knew that it would help. So whenever I had a contraction on the exercise ball, I would just stop bouncing on it. I did bounce the whole entire hour, but when I had a contraction, I stopped, and I just kind of like closed my eyes and just really breathe in really deeply to get through those contractions, because they were very intense. But being on the exercise ball definitely helped my labor and delivery. So I remember at that time I tried to eat a muffin, like I wanted to, but I couldn't. So I believe I was probably going through transition at that time, because every time I took a bite of the muffin, it felt like I was going to throw up. So I was like, look, I'm not going to eat it anymore, because I did not want to throw up. I didn't throw up for my second labor, but I did throw up for my first. But I didn't want to throw up at all, so I was like, okay, I'm going to stop eating the muffin now. We had enough. But for the rest of the time, I just had ice chips. I think I had some Jell-O probably. Little snacks like that. I was able to eat up until that point when I started going through transition, and then I didn't eat anything else after that. So they left me alone pretty much the whole entire time. Nobody bothered me. I had my support people there, and they were great, but everybody just let me labor peacefully. So that was really nice. So they checked me at about 5, 6 o'clock, somewhere in between that time. And I was at a 7 or an 8. And at this time, the contractions were super strong. And I was doing my moaning. And I remember I got back in the bed. I was done with the exercise ball. I got back in the bed to just kind of relax a little bit before the actual pushing stage. So I tried to do the kneeling position that I really liked in my last labor and delivery with Matthias. But for some reason, the baby's heart rate dropped like really low. So I wasn't able to do that position, so the doctor had me turn back around, because they could see it on their monitors out in the hall when I did that position, that the baby didn't like it. So I had to turn back around, which was a bummer, but I was like, okay. And by now, the contractions are at a 10, they're at an 11, plus 11, like they're super intense. So I was just trying to find some relief any kind of way from the pain. So I remember at this point, I'm feeling the urge to push. My body is already pushing for me. The doctors are in and they're breaking down the bed, and I tell the doctor that I'm feeling the urge to push, and she was like, okay, well, on your next contraction you can start pushing. But this was only about 30 minutes after I had been checked, and I was only at like a 7 and 8. But the doctor said I could start pushing, and so that's what I did. I started pushing. Like I said before, my last labor and delivery story, it actually feels good to push with the contraction, to push with the pain, because it gives you a purpose. Like before, you're just in pain, and it does have a purpose. Of course, your body is bringing your baby down, but when you actually push with the contraction, it's like you don't feel the pain as much, or it's not as bad. So I did a practice push, and it felt so good. And then the doctor came over and checked. She was like, yeah, you're at a 10, so we can go. But nobody was like rushed or crazy or anything. Everybody was just calm and peaceful and moving in slow motion. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to push now then. So I asked for a squat bar because I watched a video on YouTube, and I can link that down below too, but it was different like labor and delivery positions. And so I saw this one position called the epidural squat, and it just looked amazing. Like, it's basically you're squatting with your legs out, and you have a bar in front of you that you hold on to, and it's like shaped like this, kind of like a trapezoid. And you can hold on to that. So that's what I did. They put my bed in the correct position to be able to push in that position, and then they brought in the bar. And I guess it's not something that people ask for a lot, because I remember they kind of scrambled around to find it. Like, it took a while for them to get it, but once they finally got it, they attached it to the bed, and I was able to use that to push. And I remember that first push, it felt so great when I started pushing. And the first time I pushed, it was just poop. Like, I could feel that it was just poop, but I was not concerned. I did not worry about it. I did not care. And you know, they just wipe it up and give you another pad to put underneath you. It's no big deal. It's part of the labor and delivery process, and it meant that I was pushing the right way. So I was fine with that. I definitely felt the ring of fire while I was pushing, but I didn't push for too long. I remember checking the clock from the time that they told me that I was 10 centimeters and I could start pushing. It was 7, and he was delivered at 7:11. So it only took me about 3 or 4 pushes, and he was out. So just 11 minutes of pushing versus the hour and a half of pushing with my second. Yeah, so that was just great. So I felt his head come out, and then at that time they instructed me to lean back a little bit. So they took the bar away, and I leaned back just so I guess they could get a better view of what was going on down there. So I leaned back, And then on the next contraction, I gave my big push, and then the whole rest of the body was out. But I was in the zone at this point, and I'm like pushing really hard with all my strength, and he was out, and I was still pushing like I had something to push out. So yeah, extremely fast labor and delivery, I feel like overall, and the pushing stage was even faster than I expected it to be. But yeah, so for this pregnancy, for my third pregnancy, I was team green again, so I did not know if it was going to be a boy or a girl. I kind of assumed or suspected it was a boy. When he was out, of course, they were like, it's a boy. So that was super exciting. It's always exciting, like when you're actually going through the process of labor and delivery and they tell you the gender of your baby if you don't already know beforehand. So it was so worth it not to know the whole time, because it kind of gives you like a little incentive while you're pushing. So yeah, so that was super exciting. However, I did experience another second degree tear, which was like the worst part of the whole thing, because the labor and delivery and just everything went so beautifully, and I was really hoping this time that I wouldn't tear, but I did. So I was like, oh, that sucks. And they stitched me up, and this time I felt all the stitches, like every single one. I don't know what the difference is. I felt like the numbing shots that they gave me, but then afterwards, I don't know. Like my mom later on, she told me maybe the doctor didn't wait for the numbing to take effect or whatever, but I felt every stitch. So I think I started counting them. It was probably like 20. I kind of lost count at this point, and I told the doctor I could still feel it, and she was like, I'm almost done. Yeah, all right. But yeah, so that was probably the worst part of the whole thing. But other than that, we really did follow my birth plan like to a T. Even down to the doctor that I had. I got exactly the doctor that I wanted. I got to cut the cord myself. I got to keep my placenta. It was just a beautiful, beautiful birth, a beautiful experience. We got about 2 hours of like golden time. They just took him and cleaned him off and gave him back to me. So everything was delayed. The cord cutting was delayed, and the weigh-in and all the scores and all that was delayed. So that was really great. I also gave him his first bath in the hospital. So traditionally, the nurses are the one that give the baby the first bath. But I was like, nope, I want to do everything first. This is my baby, my last baby. So I want to do everything. So I remember I gave him his first bath the next day. And I stayed in the hospital for 2 days, which is pretty good for me. So for my first birth, I stayed in the hospital for a whole week. For my second birth, I stayed in the hospital for 5 days. So this time I stayed 2 days, and it was a little bit shorter than 2 days because I was discharged on a Sunday at like 12 in the afternoon. So a little bit under 2 days, and I was able to go home. But he was considered low birth rate for his gestational age. So him being 40 plus 6, 40 weeks and 6 days, and he only weighed 6 pounds, so they said he was a little bit underweight. So I remember while I was in the hospital, they were doing finger sticks on him. I think it might have been heel pricks. Yeah, they were doing heel pricks on him to check his blood sugar levels to make sure that they weren't too low, because he was labeled as, small for his gestational age. But that wasn't a problem for me because my milk came in like 2 seconds after birth. Like I stopped breastfeeding Matthias when he turned 1. So that was in September, and then Kenzo was born in November. So I only was about 2 months that I wasn't breastfeeding at all. But I'm pretty sure that I still had milk in there anyway. So as soon as he was born, the boobs knew what to do. Milk was made. It was there. There was no problem. We didn't have any issues with breastfeeding as well. And I think he was small because I just don't make big babies. Like Matthias was my biggest, and he was 6 pounds, 11 ounces born on his due date. So, just don't make big babies. My mom really didn't make big babies either. So it's just, genetic kind of thing, whatever. So I was extremely happy that I had no problems with my blood pressure. It was such an experience to not have to deal with that, the magnesium and going through all of that. And I was so grateful to be able to have my VBAC again. And it's so funny, the doctor that really pushed for me to take the baby aspirin, and I think I only had like 1 prenatal appointment with him, but I think he kind of came in as like the closer. Everybody, I'm sure the doctors were like, this woman, she won't take the baby aspirin, she has a history of preeclampsia, you go in there, you go talk to her. That's kind of the attitude he had. Of course, I don't know. But he came in and he was like, so you're not taking the baby aspirin? And I was like, no. And he was like, why not? And I said, because I don't want to. And he's like, why not? So he's asking me, why not, why not, why not? Anyway, he came in after I delivered baby Kenzo, and he was just like in awe. Like he came in, he said congratulations. He said he was so proud of me that I had my VBAC and I did it epidural free and all this stuff. And he gave me this big hug. Like he was just, I was so taken back by it, his reaction. It was so funny, and it almost looked like he was gonna cry. Like I'm not lying at all. And it just to me was like a great moment, and it just made me feel so good that one, I had stuck to my guns and I didn't do something that I wasn't comfortable in doing, and that I had trusted my decision, that I trusted my body, and most importantly, that I trusted God. Like I said, I prayed so hard for this VBAC. I'm telling y'all, I prayed so hard for this VBAC, and I also prayed that, I wouldn't have any of the complications that I had the last time. And so God came through on this one. Like, he did a phenomenal job, and I'm so grateful every day when I think about it. It was just the perfect birth, like, to me. So every time I think about it, I'm just so happy. Like, it just gives me so much joy and so much peace, especially because it was during a time where I was going through a lot of stuff in my personal life, but his birth was just like the icing on the cake. It was just like, I don't know, it was just very special. And so I'm so happy with my last labor and delivery. Everything went well. It went according to plan. It went better than I expected. So yeah, it was a great experience. And that's all. So thank you so much if you watched all of my birth stories. I definitely appreciate it. Don't forget about my GoFundMe. I will leave that link down below. I also have my merchandise that I'm selling, melanin activated. And I got in a shirt and it looks phenomenal. So I do want to post a picture of that soon. I'm just waiting for that. But you can check that out. I'll leave that link down below as well. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And remember to let your story be your power. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.